This is my true story. I built a home with love, sacrifice, and trust, and I thought my daughter and her husband would honor it when I grew old. But one evening, as I sat quietly in the next room, I heard him say something that changed everything. "She'll be gone soon anyway." My daughter didn't defend me. She laughed. My hands trembled, but my face didn't. I finished my tea, walked to my desk, and began to write. I didn't argue. I planned. Before that, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is right now. And please subscribe so my story can reach more people. It was a quiet evening, the kind where you can hear the clock tick from across the room. I was sitting in my chair with a cup of tea, reading, when I heard voices through the thin wall that separated the living room from the kitchen. My daughter and her husband thought I was asleep. I wasn't. His voice came first, low and tired. He said, "She'll be gone soon anyway." He didn't whisper it with pity. He said it like a fact, a convenience. My daughter laughed, but not kindly. It was that small, nervous laugh people make when they know something is wrong but don't have the courage to correct it. That sound cut deeper than his words. She didn't defend me. She didn't even disagree. She just kept stirring something on the stove while my heart sat still in the next room. I didn't move. I didn't say anything. I stared at the cup in my hand and watched the tea tremble just slightly. I had lived long enough to know that anger wastes more strength than silence. And at my age, silence was my sharpest weapon. I listened as they talked about plans, future plans, vacations, savings, the house, the accounts. My name was mentioned only once, as a problem waiting to solve itself. People think getting old makes you weak. It doesn't. It makes you observant. It teaches you to listen when others think you've stopped hearing. I heard every word. I heard the comfort in his tone when he talked about the things that would soon be his. I heard the way she let him say it. And in that moment, something in me hardened. I wasn't surprised. I had seen small changes in their behavior over time. He had started making decisions around the house without asking. She had started treating my room like storage space. They talked about downsizing and future transitions as if I wasn't sitting right there. Still, I didn't confront them. I smiled, nodded, and waited. Sometimes silence keeps you safer than confrontation. That night I stayed up long after they went to bed. I replayed his words in my head. "She'll be gone soon anyway." Gone. Like I was a bill waiting to be paid or furniture waiting to be replaced. He didn't know what kind of woman I used to be, what kind of woman I still was, beneath the wrinkles and the calm tone. I had raised 2 children alone, built a home from nothing, and buried more pain than he could handle in a lifetime. Gone wasn't a word he got to decide for me. When the clock hit midnight, I got up and walked to the window. The house was quiet, the lights off except the one in the hallway. I could see their shadows move past the door to their room. They were comfortable, secure, sleeping under the roof that my money had paid for. I looked at the wall again, the same one that had carried his words to me, and I made a silent promise. I wouldn't fight, I wouldn't shout. But they would learn that I was still in control of my life, my home, and my choices. I didn't need to raise my voice. All I needed was a pen. The next morning I acted as though nothing had happened. I made breakfast, smiled, asked about their plans. My daughter kissed my cheek and thanked me for the coffee. He didn't look me in the eye. Guilt always makes people avoid your gaze. I didn't press it. I just watched, quiet and steady, and tucked that moment into the back of my mind. He thought I'd forgotten. He thought old age meant weakness, softness, confusion. But I remembered every word, clear, sharp, and cold. And that was the last morning they ever saw me as powerless. Everything they had came from me. The roof over their heads, the walls they painted, the yard they called ours. It all started with my hands and my money. When my husband died, I didn't have much, but I had enough discipline to keep a roof over the family name. I paid off the mortgage 1 year early. I rebuilt the kitchen myself when the ceiling leaked. I turned every paycheck, every pension deposit, into the comfort they took for granted. The house was mine, bought with my work and my sacrifices. They just lived in it. When my daughter married him, I wanted to believe he loved her for who she was. I helped them settle. I let them move in while they saved for their own place. They promised it was temporary. Temporary turned into permanent, and soon they stopped talking about moving out. They rearranged furniture, made improvements, even invited guests as if they owned it. I didn't complain. I told myself I was happy to have family close, but family doesn't whisper plans about your death from the next room. The small things started first. My name disappeared from bills. He handled the finances because he was better with numbers. He started collecting rent from the basement tenant, the tenant I had found in the house I bought, and called it shared income. My daughter followed his lead. She said it was easier this way. She said I should relax and enjoy my old age. Those words sound kind until you realize they're meant to keep you quiet. I used to work 2 jobs to build this house. Every piece of furniture in it came from a time when I worked and saved. Every upgrade, the garden fence, the new stove, the repaired roof, came from my pension, not theirs. He called it our home. I called it borrowed. He liked to talk about our future, but the only future he meant was one that didn't include me. I saw how he treated the place. He wasn't careful. He slammed doors, left lights on, ignored repairs. He acted like the house was already his, like the paperwork was just a formality waiting for my last breath. He'd walk through the halls talking about when we redo this room or when we knock this wall down. My daughter smiled and said nothing. Maybe she believed it too. One afternoon, I came home from the doctor and found a contractor in the kitchen measuring cabinets. He said, "Your son-in-law asked me to give an estimate." I smiled and said, "Tell him to wait until the owner agrees." The man looked confused. I handed him my business card, the one with my name on the deed, and told him to call me next time. That night, my son-in-law didn't look me in the eye. Neither did my daughter. I said nothing. Some lessons don't need words. They both liked to pretend the house was theirs because I was old. But old doesn't mean helpless. It means patient. I paid every tax on time, kept every document in my name, and made sure no signature changed without my knowledge. While they were busy talking about inheritance, I was busy securing my independence. Every renovation they bragged about, new tiles, new paint, new lights, was done with my money. They didn't pay for a thing. They took credit for every improvement I funded. They treated my contribution like an obligation, as if my pension existed to make their lives easier. Gratitude was replaced by entitlement, and I watched it happen without saying a word. I stopped expecting thank you a long time ago. I stopped expecting respect soon after. But that night, when I heard him say I'd be gone soon anyway, something inside me changed. I stopped being silent out of love. I started being silent out of strategy. They thought they were living in their future. They didn't realize they were living in my plan. And soon, they would find out exactly what it costs to build comfort on someone else's back. That night, I sat at the dinner table with them like nothing had happened. My daughter served soup, and he talked the loudest, filling the silence with his plans for the future. He liked to talk about what he called responsible planning. Vacations, new cars, family investments. The words came out smooth, practiced, confident. He spoke like the world was already his. My daughter nodded along. Her eyes didn't meet mine once. She stirred her soup slowly, pretending to listen, pretending not to notice the edge in his tone. I smiled through all of it. I listened, nodding at the right moments, asking small questions, just enough to make him comfortable. I wanted to hear how deeply entitlement could talk when it thought no one was paying attention. He said things like, "Once we inherit, we'll finally do that trip we talked about, and we might sell the house, downsize, get something newer." I looked at him and said softly, "That sounds lovely." He smiled, proud of his own arrogance, thinking I was agreeing. My daughter avoided my gaze again. He kept talking, painting pictures of a life he hadn't earned yet. He talked about liquidating accounts, about modernizing assets. He said those words like he understood them. He didn't. He didn't realize that every asset he was referring to was mine, built with my effort, not his imagination. I let him speak. I let him describe what he'd do once things were official. I memorized every word. My daughter looked uncomfortable, but she didn't stop him. That hurt more than anything he said. I had raised her to be kind, to be fair, to respect those who helped her rise. Now she sat there, quiet, pretending not to hear the disrespect at her own dinner table. I saw guilt in her eyes, but guilt without action means nothing. I changed the subject once, just to test them. I asked about their savings, their goals, their work. He laughed. "We're comfortable, Mom. We're not worried." The way he said it, proud, dismissive, told me everything I needed to know. They weren't saving because they thought they didn't have to. They thought I'd handle their future like I handled everything else. I smiled wider. It wasn't real happiness. It was a shield. I had learned over time that the calmest people hold the sharpest plans. I poured more tea, complimented the meal, and kept the conversation light. He thought he was charming me. He didn't realize he was giving me the evidence I needed. After dinner, I cleared the table alone. My daughter offered to help, half-heartedly. I told her to rest. I wanted them both to feel safe, relaxed, unaware. They went to the living room, laughing at something on the television, while I stood in the kitchen washing dishes, one by one. My reflection in the window looked calm, but my mind was already somewhere else. Every sentence he had said that evening played back in my head like a recording. Every plan, every mention of inheritance, every confident word about our house. I dried my hands, took a deep breath, and smiled again. Not because I was happy, but because I had found clarity. People like him mistake politeness for weakness. They think a quiet woman is a harmless one. They forget that calm is not surrender. Calm is strategy. When the dishes were done, I sat at the table again and wrote a short list. Names, accounts, plans, and one phone number, my lawyer's. I didn't need revenge. I needed balance, and balance was exactly what I was going to restore. They went to bed early that night. I stayed awake. I folded the napkins neatly, put away the teapot, and smiled one last time. Not the kind of smile that forgives, the kind that ends pretending. By the next morning, my mind was set. They could keep their laughter, their comfort, their fake politeness. I would keep my power and use it the way they never expected. Because sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't shouting. It's smiling while planning a future they'll never see coming. That night, the house was quiet, but my mind wasn't. The clock ticked in the dark, louder than usual. I tried to sleep, but the words I had heard days earlier kept replaying in my head. She'll be gone soon anyway. Every time I closed my eyes, that sentence echoed. It wasn't just cruel, it was careless. It came from a man who thought I had already stopped mattering. Around midnight, I got out of bed. I didn't turn on the light. I didn't need to. I knew my way around the house I built. The kitchen smelled faintly of tea and dust. I boiled water, poured myself a cup, and sat at the table. The moonlight came through the curtains, enough to see the edge of the folder I kept in my desk, the one labeled Estate. I'd opened it 100 times before to review things, but this time I opened it to change them. I had spent years trying to believe that love would protect me, that kindness would earn respect, but kindness had turned into currency, and I was the only one still paying. As I turned the pages of that old will, my hands stopped shaking. I found the section with their names. It had once felt comforting to see my family written there. Now it looked like a list of people waiting for me to disappear. I pulled out a notepad and began writing. My lawyer had always told me to think things through before making big changes, but some decisions don't need second thoughts. I wasn't angry. I was clear. I wrote a new plan. I made sure every word was legal, final, and unshakable. When I finished, I made tea again. It was nearly 4 a.m. I watched the steam rise from the cup and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Control. I didn't cry. I didn't even smile. I just sat there, calm, steady, and sure. For 20 years, I had given too much. Tonight, I was finally taking something back. At dawn, I called my lawyer's office. The assistant picked up, half asleep, and said she would book me for the morning. I told her to make it urgent. I didn't tell her why. Some things don't need explaining. I hung up the phone and went to my room. I changed into my cleanest clothes, the same outfit I wore when I signed the original will. There was something poetic about ending things the same way they began, except this time, I wasn't giving away my peace of mind. I was protecting it. By 9, I was sitting in the office across from my lawyer. He was surprised to see me alone. I handed him the folder and said, "I need to make a few adjustments." He opened it, scanned the notes I'd written, and nodded slowly. He didn't ask questions. He just said, "You're sure about this?" I said, "More than ever." We spent an hour going over the documents, every word, every clause, every line. When we finished, he slid the final copy toward me. My hand didn't shake when I signed it. When the notary stamped it, the sound echoed louder than I expected. It felt like closing a door, one that should have been closed years ago. I left the office feeling lighter than I had in months. The sun was warm. The air smelled clean. I walked home slowly, stopped at the bakery, bought myself a small pastry, and smiled for real this time. The kind of smile that comes when you finally understand that silence can be power. That night, I slept without dreams. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel watched, used, or ignored. I felt prepared. And preparation, I learned, is the calmest form of revenge. When morning came again, the world looked the same, but it wasn't. They still believed everything was theirs. I knew better, because while they were sleeping, I had already changed everything. They didn't notice anything. They went about their days the same way, laughing, planning, and pretending to care. He still left his shoes by the door, still watched television too loud, still called the house ours. My daughter still asked if I wanted tea in the morning, as if her voice could erase the things I had heard. Nothing looked different, but everything was. The paper they didn't know existed now held their future, and it didn't include them. The new will was clean, simple, final. I made sure of it. The lawyer helped me review every line twice. No emotion, no confusion, no loopholes. The house, the savings, the account, gone from their names. The trust I had once left for them was redirected. Every dollar, every brick, every investment that had once belonged to my legacy now had a new destination. A scholarship fund in my name for single mothers who had no help, just like I once didn't. I knew those women would understand the value of something earned, not inherited. I didn't do it out of spite. I did it for balance. For years I had watched them live off what they didn't build. They called it family. I called it dependence. They thought kindness meant permanence. It doesn't. Kindness can expire when it's abused. I left them one clause, a single condition written in plain legal language: residency subject to good conduct. It meant they could stay in the house as long as they treated me with respect. My lawyer smiled when he read it aloud. He said, "They'll fail this test within a month." I said, 3 weeks. When I got home that day, I placed the new documents inside my desk drawer under a plain envelope. No hiding, no fear. The signature was fresh, the ink barely dry. I felt lighter. That night, dinner tasted better. The air felt clearer. They didn't notice anything different about me. They never noticed anything about me. My silence had always been their blind spot. For days, I watched them. I didn't speak much, just listened. He complained about money, about how bills keep coming. My daughter reminded him softly that they didn't pay any bills. I smiled behind my book. They thought my generosity was endless. They didn't realize it had already ended. Every word he said became proof that I'd made the right choice. Every small act of arrogance confirmed what I already knew. People who count your money while you're alive don't deserve it when you're gone. I started seeing things clearly, how he looked through me when I spoke, how she spoke for me when guests came, how they treated my presence like a chore, but I stayed polite. I stayed calm. They had no idea that while they were busy pretending I didn't matter, I had rewritten the future. I had made sure that everything they counted on would vanish the moment I did. The will wasn't just a legal document anymore. It was justice. It was my way of saying, I heard you. I didn't need to confront them. The paper would speak louder than I ever could. The next time they talked about their home or their savings, I didn't correct them. I didn't argue. I just nodded and thought, enjoy it while it lasts. Sometimes revenge doesn't come with noise or anger. Sometimes it comes with a stamp, a signature, and silence. That night, as I sat in my room with the lamp on low, I reread the clause again. Residency subject to good conduct. It was such a small line, but it carried everything I had left to say. They thought they knew my future. They didn't realize I'd already changed theirs. After that day, I began watching them carefully, not with suspicion, but with quiet certainty. I knew it would only take time before they revealed exactly who they were. When people think they've already won, they stop pretending. That's when you see their truth. The first test came sooner than I expected. He left his dirty dishes on the counter again, muttering something about the maid forgetting her job. I'm not the maid. I'm the reason he has a roof over his head. I didn't correct him. I just made a small note in the back of my notebook. Date, time, and words. Evidence, not emotion. My daughter wasn't much better. She had started copying his tone without realizing it. She'd say things like, "Mom, don't worry about these things anymore." You've done enough, I had, but not in the way she meant. I had done enough to build her entire life. I'd been the one who worked overtime when she was a child, who skipped meals so she could eat, who paid for her college when her father passed away. And now she stood in front of me, brushing off my presence like I was some old piece of furniture that took up space. I didn't argue. I simply watched. A week passed, and I noticed how he treated the house. He slammed the doors harder than before. He used my furniture like it was his. He ordered things online without asking where the money came from. I watched him open packages labeled with his name, things paid for with my account. Every time he did, I made another note. My lawyer had told me to keep track of conduct, and I did, calmly, quietly, consistently. Then one night, while I was reading in the living room, I heard them arguing upstairs. His voice carried first, sharp and irritated. "She doesn't even know what's going on anymore," he said. My daughter's voice followed, low and tired. "Just be patient," she said. "It won't be long." I closed the book and stared at the wall for a long moment. I didn't cry. I didn't even sigh. Some confirmations hurt less when you expect them. I spent the next few days in silence. I didn't cook for them. I didn't remind them to pay bills. I didn't ask if they needed anything. They barely noticed. The house had become theirs in their minds long ago. He started inviting his friends over without asking me first. They laughed loudly, drinking in the living room, using my glasses, my dishes, my space. I stayed in my room, door locked, writing everything down. The disrespect didn't make me angry anymore. It made me certain. One afternoon, my lawyer called to confirm the revisions had been filed and registered. "Everything is official," he said. "Do you want to tell them?" I said, "No. I'll let them show the world why it was necessary." He laughed softly. "You're more patient than most." I said, "No, I'm just finished." By the second week, my daughter started noticing the change in me. I didn't smile as much. I didn't join them for meals. I didn't ask questions. She asked if I was feeling well. I told her I was fine. She said I seemed distant. I said I was thinking. That was the truth. Thinking about how far love can stretch before it snaps. Thinking about the way people can become strangers without ever leaving your house. He stopped pretending entirely by the third week. He raised his voice freely, called me forgetful, called me fragile, called me a burden, in my own home. I just stared at him and said nothing. My silence seemed to make him angrier. Good. I wanted him to believe I was done fighting, because I was. The fight was already over. The papers were already signed. That night when they went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table and opened my notebook again. I looked through the list of dates, notes, and small details, all of it written neatly. Every insult, every careless word, every cruel act. It wasn't revenge I was preparing. It was clarity. They would fail the test, and I wouldn't need to lift a finger. When you know people's true colors, you stop trying to repaint them. You just stand back and let them fade on their own. 3 weeks later, I decided it was time. I didn't need to wait for more proof. They had already shown me everything I needed to see. My lawyer called and asked if I wanted to arrange a formal discussion. I told him to come to the house on Saturday afternoon. He arrived exactly on time, briefcase in one hand, professionalism in the other. I had already made tea and set 3 cups on the table. My daughter and her husband sat across from me, looking confused but polite. They didn't know what was coming. They thought it was about my health. It wasn't. It was about theirs, the moral kind. He greeted them with a smile, introduced himself, and said he was there to review some estate details. My son-in-law sat straighter, his eyes lighting up. He looked like someone about to collect a prize. My daughter reached for my hand, pretending to be the loving daughter she used to be. I didn't pull away, but I didn't squeeze back. My lawyer opened his folder and placed the documents on the table carefully. The sound of paper sliding against wood was the loudest thing in the room. My son-in-law spoke first, eager and confident. "We've been meaning to talk about that too," he said. We just want what's best for her." He used that calm, fake concerned tone that people use when they're about to ask for something. My lawyer glanced at me, and I gave him a small nod. He started explaining how we were going to review a few updates. My daughter smiled politely, but I could see her nerves in the way she twisted her ring. She wasn't sure what was happening. He was sure, too sure. He leaned back in his chair, arms folded, listening like the future was about to be handed to him in writing. My lawyer began reading aloud. "This document represents the revised estate and testament of Miss Eleanor Grant," he said clearly. The title alone changed the air in the room. He continued with formal lines and dates, speaking calmly, one clause at a time. The words were simple but heavy. "All prior documents are void. All former designations are withdrawn." I saw my son-in-law's smile fade slightly, just enough to notice. He tried to keep it polite. "Withdrawn?" he asked. My lawyer didn't answer. He just kept reading. My daughter's eyes flickered between us, her lips parting, confusion settling in. "Mom," she said softly, "I thought everything was already arranged." I didn't answer. I just looked down at my cup of tea, tracing the edge with my finger. I didn't need to speak. The paper was speaking for me. My lawyer went on to the next page. "Primary beneficiary," he read, "the Marlene Grace Foundation for Women's Education." The words landed like a stone dropped into still water. My daughter's spoon slipped from her hand and clattered against the table. Her husband froze. The look on his face was worth every silent moment I had endured. The color drained out of him. He wasn't angry yet. He was confused. Anger would come later. I finally lifted my eyes and met theirs. "It's a scholarship fund," I said quietly, "for single mothers. They'll use it to study, build careers, and take care of themselves." My daughter's voice trembled. "But what about the house?" My lawyer turned the page. "The house remains under the trust until death, subject to the clause, residency subject to good conduct." My son-in-law blinked. "What does that mean?" My lawyer smiled faintly. "It means you live here only as long as you behave." Silence filled the room, real silence, the kind that weighs more than shouting. My daughter tried to speak, but nothing came out. He looked like he wanted to argue, but he didn't have the words. For the first time in years, I was the quietest person in the room, and yet the loudest. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't explain myself. I didn't need to. They were finally hearing me for the first time, not through sound, but through consequence. The tea went cold, the air didn't move, and in that stillness, I saw understanding begin to spread, slow, painful, and unstoppable. The silence after the reading lasted longer than any argument we'd ever had. My daughter's hands trembled. My son-in-law sat frozen, eyes darting from the lawyer to me, waiting for someone to say it was a mistake. No one did. He leaned forward first, voice tight. "You can't do this," he said. My lawyer didn't even look up. "Legally, she can," he replied flatly. The words hit him harder than a shout. He stared at the papers like they might change if he glared long enough. They didn't. My daughter tried to speak, her voice shaking. "Mom, you never told us." I cut her off gently. There was nothing to tell. She looked down at her lap, the realization sinking in. She hadn't just lost money or property. She had lost the image of me as someone she could control through guilt and silence. I had always been the soft one, the one who forgave. Not this time. He tried again, louder now. "After everything we've done for you." I almost laughed. Done for me? They had done nothing but live off what I built. My lawyer cleared his throat and continued reading, ignoring the rising tension. "All prior beneficiaries removed due to breach of trust." The phrase hung in the air like a sentence. Breach of trust. That was exactly what it was. He slammed his hand on the table. The tea spilled, the cup shattered, and my daughter jumped. "This is ridiculous," he said. "We deserve that house. We've taken care of you." My lawyer closed his folder calmly. "You've resided here rent-free under Ms. Grant's generosity. That generosity has now ended. His professionalism only made the moment colder." My daughter began to cry, quiet at first, then louder. "Mom, please," she said. "We can fix this. We'll do better." I believed her for a second, then remembered every night she let him talk about my death like it was a business plan. I didn't answer. I just looked at her and said softly, "I already fixed it." He stood up and started pacing, muttering about lawyers, appeals, courts. My lawyer didn't flinch. He'd seen this kind of anger before, the kind that appears when entitlement runs out of ground to stand on. "You can challenge it," my lawyer said, "but the documents are airtight." She was of sound mind, present, and advised. That last word seemed to crush the last bit of hope in him. He sat down again, jaw clenched. The air in the room grew heavy. My daughter's tears turned to quiet sobs. I didn't reach for her. I wanted to, but I couldn't. Sympathy and regret are luxuries that people lose when they mistake love for ownership. I let the silence stay. Sometimes silence teaches louder than punishment. He broke first. "So what happens now?" he asked. My lawyer looked at me. I spoke for the first time since the reading began. "Now," I said, "you live like guests, not owners. Respect this home, or you'll leave it." His eyes narrowed. "You wouldn't dare." I looked straight at him. "Try me." He said nothing else. He couldn't, because for the first time, he was facing a version of me that didn't need his approval. The woman who once gave everything now owed him nothing. The woman he thought was fragile now held every piece of paper that proved otherwise. When the lawyer left, the house felt different. It was the same furniture, the same walls, the same air, but everything had shifted. Power had changed hands. My daughter sat still, whispering apologies I'd already heard too late. He stared at the floor, silent, defeated. I stood, picked up the broken teacup and threw it in the trash. That sound, ceramic shattering against metal, was the sound of the last 20 years breaking cleanly. They finally realized that the inheritance they were waiting for wasn't wealth. It was patience. And mine had just run out. It started with silence, the kind that feels like the air has weight. Then came the sound of him breathing hard, followed by the crack in his voice that turned into shouting. "You can't do this!" he yelled again, louder this time. The calm he once used like a mask had vanished. My daughter tried to calm him, her voice shaking, but he pulled away from her. "All these years," he shouted, "we took care of you, and this is how you repay us?" His anger filled the house like smoke, thick and ugly. I didn't respond. I didn't move. I just watched him unravel, one word at a time. My daughter started crying, real tears this time, not the kind that ask for sympathy, but the kind that come from realizing something has slipped too far to fix. She said, "Mom, please, we can change. We'll do better." But I had heard too many promises that only lasted until the next favor. I kept my hands on my lap, steady, unmoved. I wasn't being cruel. I was being clear. He grabbed the papers, his hands shaking, eyes scanning the lines as if he could somehow change them with enough rage. "This isn't right," he said. "We earned this." I stood up slowly. "No," I said. "You were given this. You never earned it." My voice was calm, steady, not angry, and that made him even angrier. People like him don't know how to handle calm. It makes their power useless. He slammed the papers back on the table. "You think this makes you strong?" he snapped. I looked at him and said, "No, it makes me free." My daughter covered her face with her hands. She whispered something I couldn't hear, maybe an apology, maybe just regret. It didn't matter. The damage was done long before the papers were signed. Then came the screaming, real, panicked, desperate, the kind that comes when people realize they can't undo what's already written. He paced the room, shouting about betrayal, about fairness, about family. The word family sounded hollow in his mouth. My daughter tried to hold him back, but he pushed her arm away. "She's ruining everything," he yelled. I didn't argue. I let him hear himself. Every sentence, every insult, every excuse. They were all proof that I had done the right thing. When he finally stopped shouting, the room was quiet again except for my daughter's sobbing. She looked at me through tears and asked, "Why, Mom? Why would you do this?" I took a deep breath. "Because you both told me I'd be gone soon," I said. "I just made sure that when I am, you'll remember me correctly." The words came out plain and final, I didn't need to explain further. Truth doesn't need decoration. For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of the refrigerator. Then he muttered, almost to himself, "You'll regret this." I looked him in the eye and said, "No, you will." That ended it. He didn't say another word. He just stared at me, red-faced and silent like a man who had lost a game he didn't know he was playing. I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the light was fading. The house, the garden, the fence, everything looked peaceful again. It was strange how chaos could happen in a place that still looked calm. I turned back to face them. My daughter's makeup was smeared, her eyes swollen. He was sitting down now, quiet, defeated. The anger had drained out of him, replaced by something smaller. Fear. I walked past them without a word, opened my bedroom door, and closed it behind me. Their voices started again, muffled through the walls, arguing, blaming, crying. It went on for hours. I didn't listen. I lay down in bed, eyes open, staring at the ceiling. For the first time in years, I didn't feel trapped in my own house. I felt safe. The next morning, I woke up to silence again. The calm kind. The kind that means something has finally ended. The kind that feels like peace earned the hard way. They had screamed for hours, but I didn't hear anger anymore, only fear. The kind that comes when people realize they built their comfort on someone else's strength, and that strength finally walked away. By the next morning, the house was quiet again. Not peaceful, not yet, just empty of noise. They didn't come out of their room until nearly noon. When they did, neither of them looked at me. My daughter's eyes were swollen, her face pale, her husband's steps slow and stiff. He didn't speak a word, just gathered his jacket and keys like a man leaving a funeral. In a way, he was. Not mine, his own. The version of himself that believed he was untouchable was gone now. He walked out the front door without saying goodbye. My daughter stayed behind, sitting across from me at the kitchen table, eyes fixed on the cold tea from the night before. She didn't apologize right away. She didn't need to. The silence between us said everything words couldn't. I could see the confusion in her face, the mixture of guilt and shock. She wasn't angry anymore. She was finally awake. It took losing what she thought was guaranteed to realize what she had been taking for granted all along. I didn't comfort her. I didn't gloat. I simply said, "Now you understand." She nodded slowly, tears falling quietly, and whispered, "Yes." After she left, I sat alone in the house for the first time in years and felt something new, relief. It wasn't joy or pride or victory. It was peace, clean and earned. I looked around the rooms and saw everything for what it really was. Not a battleground, not a prize, but my home again. Mine, legally and rightfully, in writing and in spirit. I had spent too many years living quietly while others used my silence as permission. That time was over. The phone rang that evening. I didn't have to check the screen to know who it was. I let it ring once, twice, 20 times. I didn't pick up. When it finally stopped, the house stayed quiet. The sound of no apology felt better than any excuse could. I sat by the window, the same window where I had once watched them come and go like owners, and looked out at the yard. The garden needed trimming, the fence a bit of paint, but it was beautiful again. Everything was where it should be. I thought about the words that had started all of it. She'll be gone soon anyway. They had meant it as an ending. I turned it into a beginning. They wanted to inherit comfort. I left them consequence. I didn't do it out of hate. Hate is heavy. I did it out of fairness. Fairness feels lighter. My lawyer called the next day to confirm everything was finalized and filed. "You did the right thing," he said. I told him, "I didn't do the right thing. I did the necessary thing. There's a difference. The right thing feels good. The necessary thing makes peace possible." Weeks passed. The house stayed quiet. I started filling it with new sounds, music, phone calls to old friends, laughter that didn't carry guilt. I even started volunteering with the scholarship fund I'd created. Meeting the women who would benefit from what used to be my family's inheritance made everything worth it. They were grateful, humble, hardworking. None of them expected anything for free. They reminded me of who I used to be before comfort turned my daughter blind to gratitude. Sometimes, late at night, I still hear echoes of that old sentence in my mind, but it doesn't sting anymore. It reminds me that I had the strength to listen without reacting, to act without cruelty, and to walk away without noise. I learned that dignity doesn't need witnesses. I don't hate them. I just finally stopped protecting people who didn't protect me. They taught me what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness. I taught them what happens when you mistake silence for surrender. They said I'd be gone soon. They were wrong. I'm still here, stronger, freer, and finally unburdened. And the best part? I didn't have to raise my voice to win. I just changed the paper, and 3 weeks later they started screaming.